Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Sarah Snyder. She's Associate Director of Medical Affairs at BioSplice Therapeutics. And we talk about the power of podcast, one of my favorite subjects. 3 surprising ways MSLs can level up by tuning in. So great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys will as well. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and of course, LinkedIn. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm excited that you're here and I'm excited to talk to you. And I love your topic, near and dear to my heart. But before we get into that, why don't we start with an introduction?
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Sarah Snyder, and I am a pharmacist by training. I've been in the industry, over 20 years to age me a bit. So, I've done a variety of roles at both big pharma and then also startups. So currently I work as an associate director in medical affairs at BioSplice Therapeutics, which is a company that's developing a therapy for knee osteoarthritis and also some oncology products in the pipeline. So it's exciting. And I live in the Midwest, and so we can talk about why podcasts are near and dear to my heart with the big territory. But I love the MSL role and medical affairs, and just I really am a big fan of your podcast. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you coming on and I appreciate your idea. So you had an idea of doing a podcast about podcasts and the importance of podcasts and why MSLs should really be using podcasts. So tell me about your background. Like, are you just a big fan?
Yeah, so it's kind of silly. I think the way I worded it to you is I feel like podcasts literally changed my life. And when I say that, I'm in the Midwest. So a lot of my territory is, 3-4 hours in the car. So that time that used to be like listening to music or maybe, XM Sirius radio or whatever, when I found podcasts, it just opened up a world that I could continue to learn, but on the road. So it was like a way to use that time so much more wisely. And I'll say I'm a big fan of Audible and audiobooks. Yeah. But the unique thing about podcasts is just the diversity of topics. So if you want to learn, you can pretty much learn anything. And just that whole, I think most MSLs are lifelong learners. So it's just a perfect gift for us.
For sure. For sure. And, it keeps you company. It's because you feel like, and the more you listen to the podcast, the more you feel like you know the people and it's like your friends are talking to you. I'm a big Joe Rogan guy. I listen to Joe Rogan every day. And I feel like he brings on his friends and people he knows and like all these scholars and all this, these really, really smart people. And so not only do I feel like I'm getting educated, but I almost feel like I'm in the middle of a conversation of people that I kind of now know, even though I've never met them before.
Exactly. Spot on.
So now why should MSLs be listening to podcasts and which podcasts should they be? Let's just jump right into it. I really want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, the first part I think is the information overload is real. It is a struggle now. I mean, the number of journals putting out content, and then you have webinars, and then you have conferences, and just trying to keep up to date in your therapeutic area. It's a full-time job just doing that.
Right.
So the beauty of podcasts is that, where you used to have to go to that journal every month and, look at through the table of contents, whatnot. They all have podcasts now, whether it's, I'll just give you some general ones, not specific to therapeutic areas because everybody has their own, but let's say JAMA, Lancet, New England Journal, they all have podcasts. So you can listen to that and get, okay, what is new in medicine this month? Or for me, let's say rheumatology, there's 10 different rheumatology podcasts that I could listen to and stay up to date in my therapeutic area. And some of them are journals, some of them are like individual rheumatologists putting them on. Some of them are societies. So things like that are just, it's a great way to keep up to date.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think that this is just something that people just need to be educated on. I think once they get into the habit of listening to podcasts and start to really enjoy it and make it a part of I'm not going to say their daily life, but maybe their weekly life. And then you start to figure out which ones are going to be really helpful, and which ones you probably need to tune into. Then you start to subscribe to them, and then you start to see what episodes you want to watch. So there's a little bit of a process involved. I mean, do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. And when I was talking to you about, just the whole why, I really thought about 3 specific reasons that I could say, okay, MSLs or medical affairs professionals in general. Number 1, keeping up to date. Number 2, we can talk about this separate, is connecting with opinion leaders. So I found it, especially with COVID, my territory this year includes a lot of new people that I've never met before. So podcasts are a way to learn about people, like you already alluded to, how you're like, gosh, I feel like I'm in a conversation with these people. So we can talk about that a little bit more. But then the third thing I think is personal development. And again, we can talk about that. But those are kind of like when I think about the whole why, and you're right, it's an art, not a science, of finding which ones, do I personally really like, and then I can subscribe and keep up with.
Well, and you did come up with the 3 surprising ways you can use podcasts. So let's jump into that now. I really do want to hear more about these 3 different ways that, that MSLs can use podcasts. So yeah, let's definitely jump into that.
Yeah. So I already kind of talked about the first one, but it's keeping up with information. Mm-hmm. So I think you've got to kind of go through your therapeutic area and look, again, journals, mm-hmm. look at the societies. Yep. And those are usually pretty short ones that maybe they're once a month. So it's not like a big time suck or anything. And then individuals that are doing them, especially post-conference. Some of those are fantastic. And a lot of times they have like a daily one post ASCO or during ACR for rheumatology, for example. And you can get kind of the highlights from OLs and they're, speaking what their opinions are. So it's not just an article or a poster, but they're actually giving their thoughts on it. So I think that's really important. The other ones that can be really good are journal club ones, and that would be therapeutic area specific too. There's some in rheumatology, and they'll actually critique an article, and then you can what you're getting that's different is actually you're getting opinions from people and what they think. Right. So I think that's kind of where I would go. I already mentioned New England Journal of Medicine. Another one that's more general is Curbsiders. And that is a good one. It's like Curbsiders Internal Medicine, and it's pretty broad, but a lot of us are trying to keep up with not just our therapeutic area, but kind of overall medicine. So that's kind of a nice one that they just do general topics. And then again, if you just go to listennotes.com, so mm-hmm. www.listennotes.com, and put in, let's say you work in gastroenterology. If you put that in and then put podcast shows in, you'll get a list of what the shows are in your therapeutic area, and you can kind of pick, okay, that one looks like it might be relevant. Oh, there's one on disease guidelines. I should listen to that episode. That's kind of how I would, if I was going to start.
Awesome tip. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's where I would start with, kind of that one. But
mm-hmm. Awesome. And it's listennotes.com.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Cool. Mm-hmm. All right. So number 2, are we on number 2 now?
We are. Yeah.
All
so
right.
Number 2 is my favorite, I think, because the MSL role is all about connecting with others, right?
Right.
So we want to connect with our opinion leaders, and we want to provide them value. That's right. The number 1 thing. So what I found is those people that have either their hosts on a podcast, or you'd be surprised how many of your key opinion leaders are actually out there being guests on podcasts and talking. So if you can know that and listen to it before you go and meet with them, or you can follow up with a note that said, hey, I heard you on the Rune Now podcast, or I heard you on my therapeutic space right now is osteoarthritis. So I'll give you an example. A key opinion leader, David Hunter, hosts one called the Joint Action Podcast. And he has key opinion leaders worldwide on this. They're usually about 45 minutes on a specific topic. And what they do at the beginning is they talk about themselves a little bit. So he'll say, tell me 5 words that describe you, or, tell me a little bit about what you do in your spare time. Well, right there, you're like, okay, I'm understanding a little bit about this person, what they value, what kind of, how in depth they are, just just their persona a little bit. And then when I get to meet with them, I already have a vision of what they like and, how detailed do you think, you can just make a lot of predictions based on listening to them. And again, like I said, you can follow up with them immediately and say, hey, I heard you last week. This was really insightful. Could we meet? I'd like to hear more about this, so that's where that value is.
I mean, what better way to get an inside track and really kind of get to know someone than by listening to them and hearing about them and maybe their interests? Because I have to imagine that they're going to inject their personality and interests into the podcast. That's just the way it works.
It's totally the way that it works. And, don't we all like to be heard? So if you are paying attention and you're like following up, and then maybe you go to their Twitter and you when they post that podcast, you can, give them a like on that, I mean, those things I think pay off. When they know that you're listening and you're not just coming to them to like feed them your data, I think it just makes much more of a relationship as an MSL.
Totally. And I love that in mentioning the engagement piece, I think is really important, because follow up, obviously, because you can listen to all the podcasts in the world of your KOLs. Unless you follow up, you're just collecting information, you're not acting on it. So follow up is really important, but that engagement piece is important because a lot of times if you're engaging with these folks, they start to see you and they start to get familiar with you. And now, unless they know you already, but if they don't, that's just exposure, right?
Right. No, you're exactly. I mean, we're pre-launch stage right now on the product that I'm working on. So one of my top kind of digital opinion leader, national opinion leader, he, won't meet with me until after we launch.
Right.
But I'll tell you, I am sure to respond to his podcast and give him, like I said, a like or a, comment on that kind of thing, because, I can show that I appreciate what he's doing. And actually I really do. It's an educational service that he's providing, but yeah, it's a wonderful way to engage.
Awesome. All right. So where are we at? Number 3.
All right, number 3, and I think this is something we tend to neglect because we are in an industry that we're so high pressure and we're trying to give, and we tend to, personal development can kind of fall to the wayside a little bit. So again, I'm a big fan of audiobooks on this subject, but I think the power of podcasts is they can be really motivational and just help you gain skills in a different way that it's hard to keep up, whether it's technology or just, communication, especially last year where we were all stuck at home, it's, I think podcasts can be incredibly motivational, and I can talk about a couple of my favorites, but, also subjects like personal finance that maybe you don't have time, and you don't want to spend your weekends, reading a personal finance book. There's some great ones out there. One of my favorites is The White Coat Investor, and it's geared to healthcare professionals, and it's all about personal finance. And he tells stories. And like you said earlier, you feel like you're part of the conversation, and you're like, oh gosh, I wish I would have that 20 years ago when I started, right?
Yeah.
So that one's really good. Another one for medical professionals is the podcast by Kevin, MD, and he's probably the top digital influencer as far as physicians go, but he has so many episodes on burnout and relationships out of work and things like that I think we all benefit from, even if we're not like in clinical practice. We still can feel the burnout. Then some of the other ones, I guess, as far as personal development, I really like the quote of the day. It's short, it's less than 10 minutes. And, if you're kind of feeling like, this is I got to get myself going today, you're like, you can come out of that. It's amazing how you can feel like, okay, I'm pumped up now. John Maxwell, we've probably all heard of him. He has one, On Purpose is one. It's On Purpose by Jay Shetty. He has a book out too, but he is one that I think we as MSLs could learn, like the interviewing questions and the way that he communicates. You can learn some amazing things he does weekly, or no, actually twice a week ones. So you can look at the title and see. It's not like I listen to all of these on a regular basis, but I kind of, I subscribe, and then if the title jumps out at me, I'm like, okay, that's one that, I think I'll listen to today. So hobbies too, like say I love to run. So, if I'm kind of went to one, maybe a drive or something, I'm like, I want to listen to something a little bit more low key, you can just listen to one about trail running or whatever hobby that you have. If you like to garden, there's pretty much one about anything.
Well, I will say the MSL Talk podcast is excellent to listen to while
Yeah.
gardening, running, jogging, cooking, working.
Exactly.
I'm kidding. But a lot of people do tell me, I always listen to you when I'm walking the dog, or I listen to you when I'm working out. And so I like to give a shout out every once in a while to, to people that are out there on a long drive or whatever. But yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think that I see you kind of almost catalog, and you have podcasts for hobbies, you have podcasts for education, podcasts for I was listening to podcasts. There's like crime drama podcasts, like murder mystery podcasts that suck you in. You start listening to you. I'm like, oh my God, I got to hear what happens next. So it really is a great way to occupy your time. One of the things that I've tried to do on this podcast is to also have the video on YouTube. And I'm not saying this as a plug. The reason that I did that was because people tell me that they take notes. So sometimes when they're driving or they're working out, they don't have the ability to do that. But when they get back to their desk, they either listen to it online or they'll pull it up on YouTube and then they'll take notes. So do you look for your podcast on YouTube as well to see if it's out there? Because I think a lot of them do that.
I don't, but I will say, just if search engine optimism, like the whole way that it all works, you're going to get a lot more views from YouTube. Even if you're just typing in Google, your podcast probably doesn't pop up, but it'll show up on YouTube. And then if people know you have the podcast. And I guess my point is, searching for podcasts is harder. It's just the whole way that they're searchable is not as good as YouTube. So YouTube is much easier to find things.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
No, totally. And I, again, the podcasts that I really like, I try to look them up on the internet, because like sometimes you'll listen to them and you don't know what the person looks like. You might see a picture of them, but so it's kind of nice to see them in action and get a good feel for the interaction, get a feel for the guest. But that was just a thought. What about, are there any, so you have great advice and you've given some real good, what I would say action items for MSLs on how to utilize podcasts. Are there any other action items, or is there any other advice that you have for folks on what they should do with this medium?
Yeah, I would say just remember that, you might be going to Tom's website to get it. You can go to Spotify, you can go to Apple, you can go to whatever player that you have. And again, like Tom said, subscribe to the ones that you might have an interest in. You can always unsubscribe. It's completely free. But what will happen is you'll see what new episodes come about. So otherwise, you'd have to come back through. So even if it might seem a little overwhelming at first to, like I said, maybe 5 rheumatology ones or something, it doesn't mean you have to listen to them, but at least you'll see when they're new. Or, MSL Talk, for example. So you'll see when new episodes are available. So I would subscribe. And then just get in the habit of, maybe put it on your calendar for every 2 weeks, just do a quick search in listennotes.com for your therapeutic area. Because what will happen is you can filter it by time. So you could say latest, and then it'll take you 2 minutes to look and see anything new that I should be listening to. And what will happen is right under the title, it'll say who the host is, who the guest is. So you can pick out right away. If I can see, okay, like I said, I gave the David Hunter example. I can see he's interviewing, another top expert. Oh, I'm going to, tune in right away. So that way you get it timely and you're not saying, I heard you 6 months ago, which is not a bad thing either. I don't think that there's nothing wrong with that. But that way you're picking out your opinion leaders. And if you find one that's a host, you should be a listener of it. That's my personal opinion.
I agree. And again, I don't mean to be redundant. We talked about this already, but so I think it's really, the engagement piece I think is really important as an action item. So if you're an avid listener of, let's just say it's a KOL that has a podcast, you have to assume that that person, he or she, is passionate about what they do and probably passionate about their podcast. I know I am. So when people reach out to me and either offer a comment, a compliment, or if they offer a suggestion and say, hey, Tom, I really love your podcast. One of the things I'd love to hear about is if you can cover this topic. I love that engagement and I love the suggestions, and it really helps me direct. It really shapes the podcast. It helps me direct the initiatives for who my next guest is going to be, what we're going to talk about. So I personally appreciate the engagement. I have to imagine KOLs are going to appreciate it as well if they're as passionate about it as I am.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you just made me think of one additional step. And if they have a podcast, most likely they're promoting that podcast again, like on LinkedIn and on Twitter.
Yeah.
So when they are sharing episodes, everybody wants to try to get, I'll say likes or whatever, however LinkedIn works, you can have your reaction because then their stuff will show more, that's the way that all of social media works. So if you're continuing to like that, then that shows, and follow it too. So not only would you be able to follow, I keep bringing up David Hunter, but since I did David Hunter, but also the Joint Action podcast, you would actually want to follow that on Twitter or LinkedIn too, because they probably have a separate account for that. So that's my last little take home.
No, but it's really important stuff. I mean, everything that you're saying, and again, this is near and dear to my heart, so I love this topic. I could talk about it forever. But it is true. And I'm not fishing for likes. When we talk about the engagement piece, I'm not fishing for likes, but I do appreciate them. And I do want to give a shout out to our international listeners, because we actually have a huge following in Singapore, in Portugal, in France, and in Spain. So I want to give a shout out to all my international listeners as well. Thank you for listening and for engaging. But this was really helpful. I think that I learned a lot just from talking to you, even though I'm kind of in this space to an extent, but I learned a lot too. And I love the idea I really think it's important to kind of catalog, if you will, and kind of set this into your schedule, so to speak. I know that in conversations that I've had with people recently, I talked to a lot of MSL leaders that are actually starting to use this podcast as a bit of a training tool, telling their MSLs, hey, listen to this episode, listen to that episode. So I think that depending on what podcast you're listening to, if it's educational, can also be a part of training.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I can see where, we're going to be hiring later this year for MSLs, and I can see where people would definitely benefit whether they're new or existing MSLs from your podcast. And, as a medical affairs team, we've actually picked certain episodes that have been really good about a disease state topic. And we've listened to it together in a virtual way this past year, and then, stopped it and then had, commentary back and forth. So that's been really neat.
Well, thank you. And again, it's just a testament to the awesome guests. It's not me. It's the medium, and it's the guests like yourself and all the other folks that have come on. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you. Any last words of advice? So what are you going to be doing? So other than podcasting, what are you doing this summer? What are you doing for fun?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've got 3 kids and a husband and 3 dogs, so they keep me pretty busy. We're doing a little bit of traveling and starting to travel back for work too. So just kind of balancing all that and, just enjoying every day. We had a great year as a family, but we're really excited to get back to some normalcy and just spend time with our extended family and whatnot. But
that's awesome.
But yeah. The last thing I'll say about podcasts is they're totally free too. And I think, people know that from your podcast, but you forget that you have all these other ones, that it's literally information that why not try it? So.
And they're so easy too. You just, you pop it in your phone and you're good to go. You put your AirPods in, you pop it in your phone and you're good to go, whether you're working out or you're in the car. It's funny. I talk to folks like friends of mine that are in the business and they're like, oh, I'm dying to listen to your podcast. I'm like, well, just subscribe. It's so easy. Yeah. Just subscribe to it and then pick out the episodes you want to listen to. And it's real simple. So again, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for all your insights. And let's do this again. We'll have to think of another topic that we could talk about next time.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. So
awesome.
And
alrighty.
Thanks for the podcast. Yep.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future, and feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.